Hi, this is Andreas and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel.
Ninjas in Pyjamas' identity in CSGO right now is essentially as the ultimate coin flip. Hence why I titled this video the NiP flip, because that's what I'm going to call it from now on. When I see them in series, when I see them beat a top team in a best of one and then lose to a much worse team in a best of one. I mean, the analogy I gave on Counterpoints, which is going to come out tomorrow, is NiP is like a souped up version of that Tai Lu team from early last year, where on the one hand, they were so exciting to watch. Their style was infectious. It was tantalizing when it worked, and they could beat a top team and upset someone and potentially derail their tournament run. But then Tai Lu could turn around and lose to pretty much anyone on any map at any time, in any fashion, and look somewhat underwhelming or be in the same close game but lose the close game. I think NiP is the top 10 version of that Tai Lu team, because they can beat a lot of teams in the top 10 and they can beat a lot of teams in the top 10 on a lot of the maps as well. But they can also lose to a lot of teams as well as in the top 10 and out of the top 10 and a lot of maps. And those could be the exact same teams and the exact same maps, just a different day. So in that sense, for best of ones, this is the ultimate dark horse team right now. They could beat a lot of teams in a best of one. Beyond that though, if you look at their actual track record this year, they don't really win series though. And that's the problem with how erratic they are, because it ends up playing out like that in series. Like, they win a map, they lose a map. They go to the third map, maybe it's close. Occasionally they win. Other times they lose. If it's a bad opponent, they might win. Even then, sometimes in 3 maps. If it's a good opponent, they might lose. Sometimes in 3 maps. So for me, they're the team most likely to do a great job of fucking someone else's tournament run up, but then not complete the feat. Like, they could lose. They could beat Team A, who might be a better team than them, in a tournament, and then they could lose to Team B, who's a worse team than NiP, and a worse team than Team A. So Team A sat around going, well, we would have fucking beat those guys and gone to the final or won the tournament, but you've let them win instead. So NiP, if anything, for me right now, are the team that might actually allow a team like obvious examples like a Na'Vi, an ENCE, a FaZe, a Renegades, a Fnatic, an NRG, maybe some of these teams to go deeper or win a tournament, due to the fact that NiP might beat out any of those teams, and even maybe on the right day, in the kind of slumping form they're in Blast, maybe even an Astralis, as we obviously saw at the end of last year. So if you look at all aspects of NiP, you'll see what I'm talking about here. So let's look at their placings first. They've played at 6 LAN events, being as they actually came in last place in EPL and they've been eliminated from that, and obviously the first stage is a LAN tournament. So at these 6 tournaments, the first was the major, Katowice. They placed top 8, legend spot, but it still took a lot of work to get there. Then, and they had to, by the way, they had to play Astralis, so understandably they got 2-0'd. Then they played Blast Pro Series Sao Paulo. They only finished 4th out of 6 there, but they did win 2 maps. Not a terrible showing all in all. Then they went to Star Series Season 7, tournament that was Swiss with best of 3 series all the way through. They made the playoffs, just as they did in Katowice. They placed top 8 there. Yeah, not a bad result all in all. They played at EPL Season 9, as I said, but they finished last in their group. Pretty overwhelming result, especially if you look at some of the people in their group. Then they went to IEM Sydney. IEM Sydney, by the way, they had Dennis back, etc. Obviously, he came back in for EPL and Sydney, I think, or was it Sydney and Madrid? I'm not quite sure. He's in there for EPL. They had Draken standing in otherwise, but Dennis had been in such poor form when he'd gone out the lineup. It didn't really affect the results much. And when they had the good results at the end of last year, actually, he was in pretty bad form then. So they went to IEM Sydney, and they only managed to 5th to 6th placing there. They couldn't crack top 4. There, another bracket tournament, but they lost a narrow game to Fnatic, who went to the final. They went to Blast Madrid, did slightly better, 3-2 this time, still didn't make the final. So they haven't made a final of any of the Blast events. They have made top 8, aka playoffs, at 4 of the tournaments that had a normal structure. They didn't make it at EPL, but they did in Sydney. And they couldn't crack top 4 at any of these tournaments. So you look at them as a team, they can get into position to get a playoff placing. They can beat opponents and get to that point. In best of ones, they can beat someone. In best of threes, they won't. And then they don't go deep. Even in the best of one tournaments, you see how coin flippy they are. Because it's not like they're just amazing at best of ones and bad at best of threes. In best of ones, they're still a coin flip. And so as a result, in best of ones, yeah, what do you know? At Blast, they go 3-2. At Blast Sao Paulo, they went 2-3. That's the sort of team they are. They're not going to 5-0 the best of ones. They're probably not going to 0-5 the best of ones, even though obviously all those things are possible if you were a true 50-50 team. But they're probably going to end up 2-3, 3-2, and they're going to be that sort of team, and they're going to creep into playoffs. But when they creep into playoffs, they're going to just creep out of playoffs by getting beaten in a close match, aren't they? So when you look at their map pool, similar story. You go down the map pool, and of the 7 maps in the pool, they literally have an even or winning record on 4 of the 7 maps. So they have a 61.5% winning record on Nuke this year, 8-5. But you look at the record there, they smash Ents on it. Blast Pro Series Madrid. Then right afterwards, they get smashed by Giants on it. Giants. And then they barely beat Cloud9 on it. Is Cloud9 even a Nuke team? See what I mean? Even the positive gets outweighed by the other one. They haven't won 3 in a row on this map, so even though they're a Nuke team and they like to play it, not really necessarily a massive strength of theirs, even though it's statistically their best map. You have a map like Mirage, they're 8-8 on that, 50% win rate. But you look, it's actually pretty underwhelming when you look at the teams that they lost to. They basically beat pretty much all the bad teams they played on it, with rare exceptions like they lost a game to Spirit bizarrely, lost one with the Devils won. But aside from that, all the good teams played Renegades loads of times, they played Astralis, they've played FaZe, Fnatic, North. They're beating the teams that are around their level or below. Like, yes, you know what? They beat out people like Vici and Vitality and Furia. But they lose to Astralis, they lose to Renegades, they lose to Fnatic. They won against FaZe, yeah, pretty good. They won against North, all right. They won against Heroic. I mean, we're fucking stretching it now, aren't we? And they eventually did win against Renegades. But that was also the Sydney where Renegades underperformed. JKS played really badly. So actually, fairly underwhelming that one of their better maps is such a coin flip anyway. And actually, it tends to be determined by how good the opponent is. They've won 3 in a row once on this map. And that 3 was Vega Squadron, Vici Gaming, and Vitality. So not the best teams. Funnily enough, all teams beginning with V that are not really that great, actually. Overpass, their 3rd best map. They have a 50% win rate on, 5-5. They have a pretty... This is actually the one that's deceptively better than the record, because pretty nice list of opponents they're playing here. Like, they're even losing to teams that play this map. Team Liquid 3 times. Obviously, you look at squads, they beat Fnatic on the map. Fnatic can play that map sometimes. They were able to beat Hellraisers. That used to be Hellraiser's favourite map. They lost to Vega Squadron. Vega Squadron certainly plays this map. They lost to Vitality. Vitality has been showing it. So that's actually an underrated one. I think all in all, they're not bad there. They did manage a 3 in a row themselves there, but that was Fnatic and then Vici and Devils, so who really gives a fuck about that? Still, actually, that's probably, for my money, overall their best map. I think that's reasonably the one that they're the best on overall, but they also do lose it to the elite teams. Train, a map that used to be their best map, if you go in the latter part of last year, they could do so much damage, they're a 50% win rate on it again, 4-4. They lost to MIBR at the Major, and then they won over MIBR at Blast Pro Series, Sao Paulo. They lost to Heroic. This was the best map of NiP in the past, and they're losing to Heroic. It's a bit underwhelming, isn't it? They haven't won 3 times in a row on this map at all this year. That's actually the winning or better than winning maps. Now we're getting down into it, because Dust 2 played it plenty of times, 9 times, only won it 3 times. Now, sure, 3 of the losses were to Astralis, so I actually think the record is slightly better than 33% win rate in terms of how good they are on the map. They beat Na'Vi on it twice, who actually have becoming a somewhat reasonably good team on the map and are starting to play it more. Still, overall underwhelming, the win rate there. I mean, if you're only going to win 3 out of 9 games, you're going to have a hard time saying, even though it's one of your better maps, you're going to have a hard time saying we're one of the best on that map. Cash, which isn't going to be in the pool anymore, they won 1 out of 3 times, but to be fair, the 2 losses were to Fnatic, who was sort of like a weird sleeper specialist on that map. Then they played Inferno twice. They lost both of them, one to MIBR, one to Vici. MIBR, not a good Inferno team, but to be fair, those were close games. So if even on your worst map where you haven't won any games, you still had close games, you can see even on the lesser maps, Just 2, Cash, Inferno, I can make cases as to why actually they're not necessarily as bad as the record looks on the win rate. So you see, in terms of individual maps, no wonder they're a coin flip team. If we look at NiP in series play, it's a similar story. They have played 16 series in 2019. They've won 8 and they've lost 8. They're not really a best of 3 team in terms of if you want the upset's more likely to come on a specific map. They could win the opponent's map, but they can lose their own map. And hence in best of 3 series, best of 1s, they'll get you some nice big time upsets. Best of 3s, not so much. Like you go and you look down the list, Of the 8 wins they had, they beat Vega Squadron, they beat Vici Gaming twice, they beat Vitality, they beat North, they beat Spirit, Heroic and Renegades. Now, of those names, the only real one who was considered better than NiP clearly was Renegades at that point in time, and they beat them obviously in the circumstances of Renegades having an underwhelming IM Sydney, but whatever, they still beat them. Aside from that, who aren't they supposed to beat? I mean, North and Vitality arguably supposed to be a better team, right? Then you go and look who they lost to. They lost to MIBR, Astralis, Fnatic, Na'Vi, Devils 1, FaZe, Team Liquid, Fnatic. The only one of those that's outrageous is the Devils 1 loss. So realistically, they've beaten pretty much all the teams they're supposed to. And then maybe they weren't supposed to beat Renegades, but they did. And then they've lost to all the teams they were pretty much supposed to, except there's one that they really shouldn't have lost to, Devils, but they did. So you look at that overall, yeah, they're kind of a coin flippy team, and you see that their strengths only take them so far when you get the best of 3. They don't tend to even steal most of the ones they should win. They have a lot of close losses. And when they beat teams, even though they're playing lesser teams, they beat them, but they beat them close. Like, of the times that they beat opponents, let's see, 6 of the 8 times they beat a team in a best of 3, it was a 2-1 series, a full 3 maps. Of the 8 times they lost, 4 of the 8 times they got 2-0'd. So 4 of the times they lost the best of 3, they still got the 3 maps. You can see the variance for this team is nuts, but it forms a reliable pattern. Then you go look at the roster, and it all makes sense. Like Rez, his numbers don't tell the story. He's the best player in this team. It's just with his role, it's going to be hard to put the best numbers. Who's the player best suited in terms of traditional role and the setup of this team to have the best numbers? It's Forest, of course, who actually is a little bit underwhelming. He has pretty solid play event to event. He is sometimes strong, but generally he's not a top 10 player in the world. He's not going to be a superstar player who can go head-to-head with the Nicos and the Simples, except on the odd map. And as a result, they don't really have the superstar player, although they have a decent, solid lineup of players. Lekro's actually had pretty underwhelming numbers this year. Seems like the odd man out at this point in time. He was a solid enough player the second half of last year. I feel like he's the one who's kind of missing a proper role in this team, doesn't fit that well. I would replace him if I could with a really strong kind of anchor type player. Get Right has had pretty bad numbers this year. Still does some cool kind of signature plays and has the odd game where he plays like a big game on stage. But I have to say, if you're going to cut someone, he's got to be up there. The 3 who should be on the chopping block, realistically, is like Get Right and Dennis. But actually, Forest isn't bonkers. It's just you're not going to cut Forest, are you? Dennis himself has had good numbers since he returned, but he was mega shit last year for most of the year. So I can't quite put all my stock in that. If he can be very good, though, that could elevate the firepower. Because actually, the firepower individually, it's kind of an issue individually. They don't have that many good players overall in terms of current performance. Even though on paper they have great names. But collectively, they are decent enough. I still think they lack a little bit of firepower for a team that's not that tactical, which is why I think they're such a coin flip. And I think it makes absolute sense to me where they have such variance in how well they frag, whether they win a certain battle. I think that tends to be what loses them the game. They do lack some tactical depth, and as a result, team play can be there, seems as though it is. Fragging can sometimes be there. The maps can sometimes be there. But as a result, where's the destination? Where's the trajectory for this team? They don't really have one, do they? They kind of are a known quantity. They've had the same lineup for a long time now. I think it's fine, though. Like, it's not if you want to be a winner, if you want to be a champion. That isn't good enough. This lineup won't get it done. But they're still a really exciting team to watch. I love watching this team play. They make for great series when they play. But if they want to move on from that, they have to make some harsh cuts and they have to restructure their team. They've got a nice half of a team you could pick, but you've got to make some big moves elsewhere. Maybe in-game leader, maybe support development, maybe a huge superstar fragger if there is one. Not many of those available in the Swedish scene, to be honest. But they're a fun team to watch, but they are a coin flip. This video was kindly supported by Wendelful, Butt Pounder 420, Dean Tanglis, Andreas, Snazore Westerlund, JDubs, Chi Mao, Daniel Olivar, OllieJ, Tobias Bernasconi, NateDOhDoubleG, Alexander Rao, and a special thanks go out to Jerky's Minion, weixz, don't know how to say that, it's like a Chinese name, and Max Laine. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for some of my upcoming content? It's going to be a big feature in the next few months for me. Well, my Patreon, that's a feature. Do you want to ask me a question in my monthly AMA? Would you like teasers for my upcoming content? Find out who the next guests are. Maybe you want to take part in that monthly donator discussion with me. Well, If you want any of the above perks, put your money where your mouth is, support me via the Patreon link below, and join the Scrilluminati today.